Well, I think they've done a good job. I think if you look at the business model of cable and regional sports networks, baseball was really important because it's every day and there's a good, strong base of fans.
Sports media for The Athletic joins us right now. Andrew, great to have you on here for the first time. Appreciate it. Happy opening day to you, first of all. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and to you guys as well. Fun day, a little rainy here, so no game, at City Field, but it's all good.
Yeah, they could have had the spotlight to themselves for a couple hours on opening day. We don't have any games until actually after our show, which is a little convenient. But anyway, let's get into the state of the game first off. I mean, we were talking about how AJ's doing a bunch of interviews today, and they're like, how's the health of baseball, business-wise, media-wise, young audience? What do you see? Because you cover all sports and media.
Yeah, so and my background's covering baseball. I covered the Mets and the Yankees for the New York Post and then ESPN. So I'm a little bit more bullish on baseball than like this overarching always like baseball's dying and all this other stuff. Because I just number one, uh, if you look at ballparks for 81 dates a year, most of them get at least 20,000, some closer to 40,000 per night. How many things in entertainment or anywhere around the world can draw that many people, that many nights, that consistently? That's number one. Number two, I think when you look at what I predominantly cover, TV, uh, I think that they don't tell their story well enough. I think if you added up all the hours that people watch baseball and you compare it to football, it'd be much greater. And people would be like, well, there's 162 games and there's only 17 games for football. Well, that's also the advantage for the NFL and why their ratings are better. I'm not saying, let me be clear, the NFL is in better shape. It's a better TV sport. It's a better setup. And so I'm not taking anything really away from the NFL. I just think baseball story is better. And that said, on national baseball, they have some issues in terms of trying to sell those packages in the future. And ESPN, I've written, they're likely going to opt out of their contract or at least threaten to after next year. And the streaming thing on a national level hasn't worked. And then I'm sure you guys have covered, the regional sports networks, and obviously, that's really important to teams and salaries, and that's a big issue that's ongoing in the next couple of years.
Andrew, I agree with you that things are positive. I'm bullish on baseball. Obviously, I love baseball, but I also think with the young talent and the people that we have and the way the sport is trending and the teams that are exciting, and we have new teams getting into the postseason, and it's in a good spot if we don't mess it up, right? But what's next for baseball? You mentioned the streaming services. We've beaten the local, Valley Diamond Sports to death about like, oh, they don't have any money, the RSN stuff. What's next for baseball? What can Major League Baseball do to help itself out and get its product more out there?
Well, I think they've done a good job. I think if you look at the business model of cable and regional sports networks, baseball was really important because it's every day and there's a good, strong base of fans with people, especially younger people, not getting cable. Those RSNs, which have the rights to the local teams, are struggling, and Bally owns a lot of them, about half the teams. And so what's going to happen, almost undoubtedly, is that at some point MLB is going to take control of more teams' rights in probably a streaming environment. And will they do it alone? Will they have a partner like Disney, ESPN, or Amazon, or Apple? That's the question. The problem, and this is where it could impact salaries and the structure of the game, is will they be able to recreate what the regional sports networks were paying for those rights? Like if you look at San Diego, I think it was 65, $70 million a year. And then, they turned it streaming, and MLB had some numbers. I think it was 18,000 people, got it. It's only year one, but that doesn't add up to 70 million over a year at, if it was $20 a month. So yes, there's questions about how, they're going to transition, and nobody really knows the full answer and how to do that. It's kind of what's going on in all of media. It's not just baseball, but baseball is definitely, there's some issues there because You're not getting, cable and RSNs when you're on basic cable. That means everybody in that region is paying for it. So someone who lives next door to you who never watches a baseball game is still paying for it. Now, we get into a bigger discussion about the cable bundle, and what people don't understand when they bring this up is that that other person might like the cooking channel that you don't watch that makes it possible for them to have that. But that's another story for another time. But to recreate what they're getting financially is going to be difficult, and they're going to have to be very smart and nimble in terms of how they go forward. So it's in question for sure.
Are they the ones to be able to do that? Is MLB, based on the awareness and behind the times decisions that they make, or delayed decisions that they make, are they the ones best suited for this? Or is this something that they'd be better outsourcing, selling the product, and then making sure, like an Amazon, if they can't partner with an Amazon, letting somebody that knows what's going on and isn't a bunch of 60-plus-year-old white men who don't understand how to push to the younger crowd.
Okay, so a couple of things there. Number one, in baseball's defense, what they did with MLB BAM, they were really ahead of the curve. So they and then they sold it to Disney. So they actually haven't done a terrible job in terms of moving to the digital spaces. But what you're asking, yeah, they look. What I think ideally they would love to do is be able to sell it to Amazon or Disney at a huge price. Get a big check that they could give to all the teams and let them figure it out and go from there. But I think in most cases, these big companies, they don't become big, successful, rich companies by just doing deals on spec when they don't know the outcome. I wrote this the other day in a story I wrote about ESPN that with the regional sports network, ESPN and Disney, they're not looking to write a big check. They're looking more for a partnership. And obviously there could be some money involved up front, but they're not just going to take all the risk. And so that's where, things could change in terms of the salary structure. And, the other issue that you always get into with baseball, again, slightly overrated just because of how the playoffs work in terms of it being such a crapshoot. But, the haves and the have-nots, like the Dodgers, for example, their contract goes forever. They're paid, I don't know the exact number, but it's a crazy amount. That allows them for a long time to be able to afford Ohtani, etc. The Yankees and the Yes Network, they're still doing well. They have a deal already with Amazon, and Amazon's part owner of the Yes Network. So you do have this issue of the have and the have-nots. And I think in a perfect world, if MLB could have their way and Rob Manfred and company could do it how they'd want, they get all the rights under one roof and just sell it as one entity worldwide, and each team would get the same amount of money. But the Yankees, the Dodgers, the big market teams, they're not going to go for that, at least not in the near term. And so it gets complicated because of that structure. You look at the NFL, yes, there are teams that are valued more, but in terms of the TV contract, everyone gets the same amount. It works out for everybody because it's so much, $110 billion in total on these last contracts. And they have all these little side deals where they keep adding more money. And so, it's complicated. Yeah, and to your overall point is that they're gonna have to be smart about it because it could really impact the future of the game if they don't do it correctly.
And I'm curious how they'd ever be able to accomplish that with those larger teams, Andrew. Like, I guess the NFL did it so long ago that it's just standard, it's grandfathered in. For MLB, if you look at some of the teams that you mentioned, like the Yankees and the Cubs, why would they ever kind of be in the same pot when they know that they're going to bring in so much more of an audience? Would they have to almost come up with numbers based on what their audience scale is and pay them out that way? Because it has to do with the valuation of your franchise, because they'd be bringing in obviously less revenue if they're sharing that way like they do for the national deals.
Yeah, exactly. So look, the NFL has changed over the years with the Jerry Joneses of the world who, have made it so, the Cowboys do get compensated a little bit better, but overall it is a kind of a team entity that they're not always in stride together. And so, but you hit it on the head. It's the legacy of what they've done in the past. And I mean, if you look at it from, let's say, the Yankees' point of view, you can understand why they don't feel like they should be paid the same amount as the Pirates, especially when you have revenue sharing and they're sending, checks to other teams who don't spend, which is always a source of issues because like the A's, for example, apparently make a lot of money every year, and we all know the situation there where they're not spending at all, and so that obviously draws the ire of the big market teams that have to write checks because of their their payrolls. So yeah, it's complicated. Like it's not easy, and you have all these moving parts, but it is gonna there is gonna be a large contingent that end up on streaming of some sort. Now maybe they get local rights, and the other thing, the problem in that pay model too, that was better when you had cable, is that you're forcing people to make decisions on your sport all the time, and you're limiting the amount of people that see it just on a casual basis. And so if you teach people that it's hard to get the sport every day and it's expensive, they're going to stop watching. So they got to also figure out distribution and figure out, is it better to be seen, and maybe there's some broadcast opportunities, because that's what we've witnessed in other sports where broadcast is made. It's always been popular, but more of a comeback. So if you're on like AJ on Fox Sports, on a game of the week, there's an advantage to that, even if the money isn't great. It's just a huge, not that Fox does pay a lot because obviously they have the World Series, but the game of the week really isn't worth that much on a Saturday afternoon. Even when AJ's broadcasting it well, it's still only worth so much on those days. But the bottom line is, it's easy for people to just kind of turn a channel and they see it, and that's worth a lot as well. So again, very, very complicated.
Andrew, first of all, thanks for the nice words. But second of all, it's valuable because they get to advertise all their other stuff, right?
Yep.
So they get to advertise Fox, they get to advertise football, they get to advertise NASCAR, they get to advertise their shows that they're putting on. That's where the value lies. In think about, I think it's June 8th for the Fox this year. I'm in London for the Mets Phillies, right? You have the Preakness that same day, and then the nightcap is Dodgers Yankees in Yankee Stadium, right? So think about that viewership for Fox that one day. So, it might not be worth it in the short term, but in the long term, that's why Fox is like, yeah, we like what we do with baseball. And obviously I'm biased, but I think Fox does baseball by far, in a way, the best broadcast, right? So that's why it's different than, short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. But I digress. I wanted to ask you about something completely different, and you got me off track, but I'm going to ask anyways. Did you see what happened to Joe Girardi today at Yankee Stadium? Uh-oh. He muted himself.
I think he went mute. Hold on, Andrew.
I tried to be a pro. I was coughing, so I muted myself, and then the thing went on mute.
That's pro.
I was being like, a major professional, and then I'm pressing it won't mute. I was trying to do it calmly so you guys couldn't tell, but I did see that. Having covered the Yankees and Girardi, I did find it slightly funny. But you'd think they'd let him in. And also, haven't the Astros done enough to Joe Girardi? I mean,
granted, it was in Houston. It wasn't in Yankee Stadium. It was in Houston. They didn't let him in because he had the wrong credential. Now, I've been to Houston a billion times, and there's a security guard that sits out there, and he has his hat on, and he's like this. And he just sits there, and he has a TV. And literally, like, the time hits, and if the time is like 1 second early, he will not let you in. Mm-hmm. And they are probably the hardest about the credential police in the league of all the places I've been. Like there was like one guy, two guys, and they are like, beep, you got to do your little badge scanner. I'm sure Andrew's seen it. Scott, you've seen it.
Yes.
You like the little badge, and they have to scan it with their special phone. But I mean, Girardi had the wrong one, so the Astros like, no, you can't come in here.
The whole Girardi thing to me is also kind of, I wonder what your guys' take is on that. That was an interesting development. Obviously, he did some broadcasting after the Phillies, and he's been with the Cubs, but to have the preceding manager in the booth or in the studio, on the studio shows, talking about moves that the manager's making, the current manager's making, I find that a little bit odd. I know, like, they passed.
Andrew, I'll raise you Ozzie Guillen, and Bob Brenly.
Yes, but I feel like, and again, I'm not as well versed on.
Ozzie doesn't criticize anybody, so I mean,
yeah, right.
I mean,
well, Joe won't. I just think it's interesting because Joe, after 10 years, he won a World Series, and I had that run where they lost to the Astros in Game 7, and then got let go. by the Yankees. So it wasn't as popular when he left, but now, the manager, you don't win a World Series in New York, you're terrible, right? Aaron Boone's done pretty well in most worlds. People would be like, yeah, he's done a pretty good job. In our world, it's, World Series or bust. But I do find it like, I don't know. I found that to be a strange one to me. I know like, Buck Showalter, someone they were interested in. From what I heard, Buck had some reservations about, talking about someone who, I don't know if Aaron Boone's on the hot seat, but he might be. If they don't make the playoffs this year, that's 2 years in a row. He could be out. So I don't know. I found that to be a strange one. And Joe's very guarded. He's not bad on the air, but very guarded. So he won't criticize purposely. He's no Ozzie Guillen, but I thought that was a curious one. But now he can't even get into the clubhouse. So hopefully he can get on the field and do the broadcast.
I'd challenge you to find somebody that is like Ozzie Guillen. That would be easier to. That would be a harder thing to do. It's easier to find somebody that isn't as openly criticizing as Ozzie Guillen.
I covered Bobby V. I'd put Bobby V in that category.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a guy, right? Like who, I don't know, but yeah, Bobby could do it. But yes, you're right. Ozzie is definitely different, special in that way.
Who do you think MLB has embraced new media well enough? Because we had a team tell us we don't do podcasts, and that was the line they drew in the sand. We don't do.
We're
podcasts.
a digital show, by the way.
We're not a podcast.
Right? Well,
we're a live digital show.
Now, without you didn't mention the teams, I'm not going to try to get you to say it, but is it one of we're talking about the big market teams that gets 1 million asks, or was it a smaller market team? Can you give me that?
It was. You're talking like the Dodgers, the Phillies, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the teams that have like the big. It was one of those.
They all say they don't do podcasts?
No. Just one. He was saying it's a big market team. It was a big market team.
Yeah. So I think maybe the thinking is a way to say no, but you guys are a little bit different, right? Like you know what I mean? You guys are all, obviously established ex-players, most of you. So I feel like, I don't know, usually it's different rules, obviously anybody who's in media gets asked to do 1 million podcasts, and you try to be nice and do as many as you can. But so these teams get asked a lot. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, that's ridiculous. Like a show like yours, you want your guys on there, right? Like if you asked, again, you guys have relationships so you can get people, but if you ask for the Mike Trouts and the A-Rods, like A-Rods, Aaron Judges of the world, you guys might have to go directly to them. I don't know if they're going to set that up if they're if you're the Yankees, or the Angels, but yeah, that sounds ridiculous. So that's not very forward thinking, and pretty, quite honestly, stupid. In my opinion, again, depending on whom you're asking and what like Aaron Judge is not doing that many, interviews outside of the clubhouse, unless he's promoting something. You just don't hear him. He's not on the radio all the time. Those type of guys, who get so many, requests, that I can understand it. But yeah, as an overall principle, if that's what a franchise is saying, that's stupid. In this day and age,
Yeah, they're in the Stone Age if they're thinking that way. I agree. So, and we had to say we're a digital show. We also were on linear television last year as well through Stadium during the season, and should be on there again coming up soon. So anyway, we had to explain to them how things work. I think that's Kratz's point too. It's like, do we have to do that as much in other sports, right? If you went to an NBA team and said, our show has 10 former MLB players on it, right? And your colleague Ken Rosenthal and Alana Rizzo and myself, whatever, like, if you have to go and explain what you're doing, I'm like, are you paying attention? Because I don't feel like, basketball has to do that if JJ Redick's company approaches them and says, hey, we want to do, a 20-minute interview.
Yeah. Well, every NBA player and ex-player has a podcast. So that's different. Someone said there should be like a podcast network of like NBA players talking about like past events, and like, I don't know, like how every single one of them has one. But yeah, look, you shouldn't. That sounds archaic. You should be promoting the game. And I also think the thing about your guys' show and what you're trying to do and what you can do in a digital world is be more organic, right? Have the conversations that you're having in the clubhouse, but bring that to a audience that doesn't get to hear that. And it's different than if you go on like a talk radio show, which, there's some people who know what they're talking about, but as someone who used to, go on those all the time, you can get some questions that are just like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, and you have to fake it. And so you would think that they would encourage that. But yeah, to answer your question overall, I don't know. All the sports there's different franchises handle it differently. Football, they can be a little bit tough. It's a very like baseball. There's so much access. I think that's what people sometimes don't understand. Like what there's really like no other walk of life where like a manager or a leader of something, has to talk to the media before and after an event, in this case, a game. Like I always said, like the Exxon Valdez years ago, put all this oil into the ocean and like you didn't hear from like the leader. And, Joe Girardi or Aaron Boone, goes for a lefty instead of a righty in the 7th inning and, he's getting grilled. Which again, obviously I did that and, you do that as a reporter. And so you want that access. So I'm not like more access, the better, but it's just an interesting dynamic. So, and baseball's done well. I mean, the media is important. Regular media is important. Like I would argue for the players, it's important. It's actually a good thing. Even though I know some players don't like it and they wish it wasn't there, it's actually a positive because if you look at the, even the big bad New York media, 80 to 90, maybe even higher percentage of the stories are either positive or just trying to explain something. Then you get the 5 and 10% that you have to deal with, no doubt about it. But as long as they're fair, I think those are fair. And I think I'd love to explain myself after every article when I get all these tweets with people saying kind of idiotic things, but like let me explain this to you. This is why I said that. This is how this works. And so I do think that's kind of something that the smart players take advantage of, and without making excuses or whatever, which I also think is unfair sometimes. I think we, as media and fans, will sometimes be like, he's making an excuse as if like the rest of the world and their jobs is making an excuse every 5 seconds. And secondly, players are asked questions where it's like, yeah, this is why, and I respect people who didn't. Jeter was amazing and not making excuses, even when he was actually hurt and nobody knew about it. So that is something to be to look upon with praise.
Yeah, and I will say, with our show, we definitely try to promote the game and like talk about how cool the game is and who the best players are, whatever. Right? We're breaking down the sport, but also baseball fans love to complain. It's like a Seinfeld episode. Like you want to complain about stuff, the curb kind of episode, and we have fun with it because there's no rules here. So Andrew, it's awesome having you on here for the first time. Happy opening day to you. Appreciate the time, and for everyone watching, listening, all that. You can check out his work in The Athletic.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.